Nathaniel Whitmore closed his fingers around the ring before the pawnbroker could take it from her hand. Clara Bennett spun around. Her eyes, dark sharp, filled with something between fury and humiliation, locked onto his face and did not move. He hadn't planned what to say. He hadn't planned any of it. 2 years of rehearsing this moment, and all that came out was her name. Clara. She took one step back, then another. "Don't," she said. Just that. One word, and it hit him like a rifle shot straight through the chest. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Clara and Nathaniel all the way to the end. And drop a comment. Tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. The pawnbroker was a small man with a habit of not meeting people's eyes. He looked at rings, at pocket watches, at the desperate weight people placed on his counter. He did not look at the people themselves. It was easier that way. He had not looked at the young woman who came in that Tuesday morning. He had looked at the ring she set down, thin gold band, modest stone. Good quality once, and he had offered her $4. She had not argued. That told him everything. People who argued still had options. People who took the first offer had none. He was reaching for the ring when the door opened and a man walked in. The pawnbroker looked up then. He always looked up when a man like that walked in. There was something about the way this one moved, not loud, not aggressive, but certain, like a man who had walked into worse places than this and come out the other side. The man's eyes went straight to the woman, then to the ring on the counter, then back to the woman. His hand came down over the ring before the pawnbroker could finish the transaction. The woman spun around so fast she nearly knocked into the counter. "Clara," the man said. Her face did something complicated. Anger came first. Then something rawer than anger, something she shut down before it could take shape. "Don't," she said. The man, Nathaniel Whitmore, though the pawnbroker did not know his name, did not move his hand from the ring. "How long?" he said quietly. "How long?" he said. She looked at him the way women look at men who have said something so wrong they don't even know where to start correcting it. "You cannot," she repeated. "You cannot. Sir, I don't know what you believe gives you the right to walk into a place of business and interfere with a private transaction. But I am telling you clearly, remove your hand, or I will call for someone who will remove it for you." "Clara." "Miss Bennett," she said, hard and flat. "You do not have permission to use my given name." He flinched. Actually flinched. The pawnbroker pretended to examine something on the shelf behind him. "Miss Bennett," Nathaniel said, "please, just give me a moment. One moment." "You've had 2 years of moments," she said. "You didn't use a single one of them." The silence that followed that was the kind that has weight to it. The kind that fills a room and sits on everyone in it. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and placed $5 on the counter, then another 5. Then he picked up the ring and held it out to her. "Take it back," he said. "Please." Clara looked at the ring in his hand, then at the money. Something moved through her expression that she fought hard to keep from showing. "I don't want your charity," she said. "It's not charity." "What is it then?" He didn't answer right away. That hesitation told her something she hadn't wanted to know, that he didn't have an answer ready. That he was standing in a pawn shop in Baltimore, telling her he wasn't offering charity without knowing what he was offering. "I don't know yet," he admitted. She stared at him. Then she picked up the ring. Not from his hand, she plucked it from his fingers and put it in her own pocket. She did not take the money. She walked past him toward the door. "Miss Bennett." "Good day, sir." She pushed out into the summer heat, and he followed her. The pawnbroker let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and went back to his work. The street outside was loud with the sounds of a Baltimore summer morning. Horses, vendors, the distant clatter of the harbor. Clara walked fast. She had always walked fast. Nathaniel had to lengthen his stride to keep up. "Will you stop?" he said. Not a question. "No. I just want to talk to you. And I don't want to talk to you." She sidestepped a cart. "We have nothing to talk about. We have Samuel to talk about." She stopped. Not gradually. All at once, like something in her had simply ceased to move. He nearly ran into her. When she turned around, her face was different. The composure was still there, but something underneath it had cracked. "Don't," she said. Quieter this time. "Don't you use his name to make me stand still. I'm not using it. I'm telling you that is why I'm here. I should have come sooner. I know that. I know how long it's been, and I know what that silence cost you, and I—" He stopped. Started again. "I am asking you for the chance to explain." "Explain what exactly?" "Explain why a man who held my brother's hand when he died waited 2 years to come find me. Explain why I have been writing letters to an address in Virginia for 18 months, with no answer. Explain why." Her voice broke. Just once. She pulled it back hard. "Explain why I had to find out through a regimental letter that my brother was dead. Not through you. Not through a single word from the man Samuel called his closest friend on this earth." Nathaniel said nothing. "I'm listening," she said. "Explain." He could not. Not standing in the middle of a Baltimore street with her looking at him that way. He had things he needed to say, things he had been carrying for 2 years like stones in his chest, but they would not come out in the right order. They would not come out cleanly. They would come out wrong, and she would have every right to turn her back on him. "Come somewhere quieter," he said. "Please. Let me buy you a meal. I am not going anywhere with you." "Then let me stand here and say it badly." He said it before he'd decided to. "Because I'm going to say it regardless. You can walk away, but I'll say it to your back." She crossed her arms. "Say it then." He looked at her. He'd seen her last when she was 21 at Samuel's farewell before the regiment shipped south. She'd been thin even then, a pastor's daughter with more dignity than income, but there had been something solid about her. Something fed. Whatever that was, it was gone now. She was wearing a dress that had been mended too many times, and her shoes were wrong for the season, and she'd been selling her mother's ring. Her mother's ring. He'd met Samuel's mother once. Quiet woman. Kind eyes. She'd pressed something into Samuel's hand before they marched out, and Samuel had shown Nathaniel later a gold-band modest stone and said, "If anything happens to me, you make sure Clara gets this. She'll need something to hold on to." Clara had needed a great many things to hold on to. Nathaniel had not been one of them. "I'm sorry," he said. "That's not an explanation. I know. I'm starting with the apology because the explanation is going to make you angrier, and I want you to know the apology is separate. It's not conditional. I'm sorry for the silence, for all of it. Whatever I say next, I'm sorry." She said nothing, but she didn't walk away. "I came back from New Orleans in bad shape," he said. "Not the kind of bad shape they write about in the papers, the other kind, the kind that doesn't show anywhere anyone can see it." He paused. I wasn't able to. There were weeks I couldn't put sentences together. My sister-in-law handled the correspondence. I told her to write to you. I believe she had." Clara's expression shifted slightly. "She didn't," he said. "I found out 6 months ago. By accident. I found one of your letters in a drawer in the study. I don't know how many others she intercepted. I don't know what she did with them." "You're telling me," Clara said slowly, "that your family member deliberately kept your correspondence from me, and that you are using this as your explanation for 2 years of silence. I'm telling you it's part of it, not all of it. What's the rest?" He looked at her directly. "I was afraid of you." She waited. "Samuel told me about you all the time. The way you read, the way you argued with the men at your father's church about scripture, the way you never let anyone make you feel small." He stopped. "He was so proud of you. And then he died, and I was the one who came home, and I knew if I stood in front of you, I would have to tell you why. And I didn't know how to do that." "Why he died," she said. Quiet. Careful. "Yes. The letter said he died in the assault on New Orleans, that he died bravely, That he was... She stopped. That's what they always write. He died bravely, as if that answers anything. He did die bravely, Nathaniel said. That part was true. But there was more. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, the war between wanting to know and being afraid of what knowing would do to her. Not here, she said finally. He had not expected that. What? Not in the middle of the street. She glanced around at the people passing the ordinary noise of the city, not caring about either of them. If you're going to tell me how my brother died, you are not going to do it here. All right, he said carefully. Where? She thought. He watched her do it, that precise measuring quality Samuel had described. She wasn't deciding whether to hear him. She'd already decided that. She was deciding the terms. There's a public house 2 streets over, she said. Respectable. They'll give us a table in the back. You will buy me coffee because I haven't had it in 3 weeks, and you will tell me everything. And then I will decide what I think of you. That's fair, he said. I'm not doing it to be fair to you, she said. I'm doing it because I've been wondering for 2 years, and the wondering is worse than whatever you're going to say. She turned and walked. He followed. The public house was everything she'd said, decent, quiet enough in the back corner, run by a woman who looked at them both and made no comment. She brought coffee without being asked twice. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup like it was something precious, which Nathaniel thought it was. Talk, she said. The assault on New Orleans, he began. January of 1815. We didn't know the war was already over. The treaty had been signed 2 weeks prior, but the word hadn't reached us. So we fought anyway. He paused. We were pinned down. British lines. Heavier fire than anyone had expected. My unit took losses fast, and I... He stopped again. I was hit, not badly, but I went down. And Samuel, he came back for you. Yes. Clara set her coffee cup down very carefully. He wasn't supposed to, Nathaniel said. He'd reached cover. He was safe. If he'd stayed where he was, he would have walked out of that field. He made himself hold her gaze. He came back because he said he wasn't going to explain to his sister why he let me die when he could have stopped it. The silence that followed was long and very full. He said that, Clara said. Those words. Those exact words. He was your brother, had a particular way of saying the most important things, as if they were not important at all. He was pulling me out of the mud, and he said it like he was commenting on the weather. Nathaniel's voice was steady, but barely. He got me to cover, and then he was shot, and I couldn't... He stopped. I couldn't save him back. There was nothing I could do. He was gone before the firing stopped. Clara was looking at the table. Her jaw was tight. Her hands still around the cup had gone white at the knuckles. He died because of me, Nathaniel said. There is no way to say it that means anything other than that. He made a choice, Clara said. Her voice was strange, distant, like she was hearing herself say the words from somewhere far away. Yes. He chose to go back for you. Yes, Samuel always did that. She was quiet for a moment. When we were children, he always went back. If something was in danger, if someone needed, he could never just leave a thing. She looked up. That was not a quality the world ever rewarded him for. No, Nathaniel said. It wasn't. But you are alive because of it. Yes. She looked at him. For a long time she just looked at him, and Nathaniel sat still under it, because he owed her at least that much. I don't know what to do with that, she said finally. You don't have to do anything with it right now. Don't tell me what I have to do. No heat in it, just clarity. I have been managing my own circumstances for 2 years without your guidance. I don't need it now. I know, he said. I'm sorry. I only meant, I know what you meant. She picked up her coffee again, drank, set it down. Why are you here, Mr. Whitmore? The real reason. Not the explanation, why are you in Baltimore in that pawn shop on this particular Tuesday morning? He had asked himself that question all the way up from Virginia. He had given himself several answers and discarded all of them because none of them were the real one. "Because I made Samuel a promise," he said, "before he died. He made me swear I would look after you, and I have failed at that promise so completely that you were about to sell your mother's ring to eat." He looked at her steadily. "I'm here because I owe him. I'm here because I owe you. And I'm here because there is something I want to ask you, and I have no right to ask it, and I'm going to ask it anyway." Clara's eyes narrowed. "What?" He reached into his coat. He placed something on the table between them. A ring. Not her mother's. Different. Simple gold, unpretentious, the kind a man buys when he is thinking about the person and not about impressing anyone. Clara looked at it, then at him. "No," she said. "Hear me, no." She pushed it back across the table. "Absolutely not. I have a plantation in Virginia, 40 acres under tobacco, another 20 in timber. A house large enough that we would hardly need to see each other if you preferred it. You would have security. You would have—" "You are proposing to me out of guilt," she said. "Yes," he said. "Among other things." "Among what other things?" He seemed to consider how honest to be. Then, "Among the fact that I have been thinking about Samuel's sister for 2 years, and I am not certain all of it was guilt." Clara stared at him. "That was the wrong thing to say," he acknowledged. "It was the most honest thing you've said." She leaned back, crossed her arms. "You walked into that pawn shop, and you stopped me from selling my property, and you followed me out of doors, and you bought me coffee, and you told me how my brother died. And now you're sitting here telling me you want to marry me because of guilt and whatever else that was. When you say it that way, it sounds exactly like what it is." She looked at him. "Mr. Whitmore, I have been living in a boarding house with 4 other women for the past 14 months. Before that, I was in a situation I prefer not to describe. I have been cold and hungry and lonely in ways that I don't have words for, and I have managed all of it alone because I had no other choice." She paused. "And you are sitting here offering me a house and security, and the reason I am not throwing your ring in your face right now is because I am trying to decide whether my dignity is worth more than my survival." Nathaniel said nothing. "Your silence," she said, "is not helping your case." "I know. I don't have anything to say to that won't sound like I'm trying to make the choice easier for you. And I don't want to do that." He met her eyes. "It's your choice. I know what I'm asking. I know it's unreasonable. I know you have every reason to say no. But I'm asking." She looked at the ring on the table. Something moved across her face. Not softness, not yet, but a kind of exhausted reckoning. "If I said yes," she said slowly. "Hypothetically, yes. This would be an arrangement. An understanding. Nothing more than that. Whatever terms you set. You would not expect affection, or any of the things men generally expect. No. You would not tell me what to do with my time, or my opinions, or my reading material. Clara. Miss Bennet." He closed his eyes briefly. "Miss Bennet, you can run the entirety of Virginia with my blessing. I am not asking for a conventional marriage. I am asking for the chance to do right by Samuel, by you, by the promise I made and broke." She was quiet for a long moment. She picked up the ring, turned it in her fingers, set it back down. "I need to think," she said. "Take whatever time you need." "Where are you staying?" he told her. She stood up, straightened her skirt, and looked at him with those dark, measuring eyes. "You do not get to disappear for 2 years and return as my savior," she said. "I want you to understand that. Whatever happens next, you do not get to be the hero of this." "I know," he said. "Good." She moved toward the door. "I'll send word by Thursday." She left. Nathaniel sat at the table for a long time, with the ring in front of him, and the sound of Samuel's voice somewhere in the back of his head. "She'll give you more trouble than you've ever had in your life, and you'll deserve every bit of it." And he thought that Samuel had not been wrong about much, and he had not been wrong about that. He picked up the ring and put it back in his coat pocket. Then he ordered another coffee and sat there in the corner of a Baltimore public house in the dead heat of summer and waited to find out if a woman who had every reason to refuse him would decide that survival was reason enough to say yes. He suspected she would. He suspected that was going to be the most complicated thing that had ever happened to him. He was right on both counts. She sent word on Wednesday, not Thursday. He had said take whatever time she needed, and she had needed exactly 36 hours, which told him something about the state of her circumstances that no amount of careful language could soften. The note was 4 sentences. She would accept the arrangement. She required it in writing before she stepped foot on any conveyance. She would bring one trunk and expected no commentary on its size, and she wished to be addressed at all times and in all company as Miss Bennet until she decided otherwise. Nathaniel read it twice. Then he wrote back with the terms in full, signed it, and sent a carriage. She was waiting outside the boarding house when it arrived, one trunk as promised, a hat that had seen better days, posture that suggested she had never in her life required assistance and did not intend to begin now. She looked at the carriage. Then at the driver Nathaniel had sent a quiet man named Thomas, who had the sense not to say anything unnecessary. She handed him the trunk, climbed in without assistance, and did not look back at the boarding house once. 3 days south to Virginia. Nathaniel met her at the edge of the property line on horseback, which he had thought was a reasonable gesture and immediately understood was wrong when he saw her expression from the carriage window, not impressed, not touched, just measuring. He fell in beside the carriage anyway. "How was the road?" he said through the window. "Hot," she said. "Are you hungry?" "I'm always hungry." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, which was probably the right choice. They rode the rest of the way in silence. Whitmore Estate appeared through the tree line the way large things always did, too much of it all at once designed to make a certain kind of impression. Nathaniel had stopped seeing it years ago. He saw it now through Clara's eyes, and it was uncomfortable viewing. She stepped out of the carriage and stood in front of the house and did not speak for a full 10 seconds. "Well," she said finally. "Yes," he agreed. Samuel never mentioned this. Samuel found it embarrassing. Samuel was right. But there was something in her voice that was not quite contempt, something more complicated. She turned to face him. "I want you to know that I am not impressed by houses." "I know." "Good." She turned back to the door. "Let's go inside." Eleanor Whitmore was waiting in the entrance hall. Nathaniel had told Clara about his sister-in-law in general terms. His brother had died 4 years prior. She remained at the estate, she managed the household, and had not told her the specific terms, because there were no specific terms adequate to prepare a person for Eleanor. She was tall, silver-haired, and possessed of the kind of beauty that has curdled slightly into something that watches. She looked at Clara the way a woman looks at a stain on a new tablecloth, not with anger exactly, but with the quiet certainty that something would need to be done about it. "Miss Bennet," Eleanor said. Her smile didn't touch her eyes. "Welcome to Whitmore." "Mrs. Whitmore," Clara said. Her voice was perfectly level. "Thank you for having me. We didn't have much choice, did we?" Eleanor's smile held. "Nathaniel does so love a project." The silence that followed that was approximately 3 seconds long and felt considerably longer. Nathaniel said, "Eleanor, I've had the East Room prepared." Eleanor continued, not looking at him. "It's smaller than the others, but adequate. I assumed Miss Bennet wouldn't require much in the way of space given her recent accommodations." Clara tilted her head very slightly. "That was thoughtful of you," she said. "I'm sure I'll find it more than sufficient." Something moved through Eleanor's expression. She had expected either offense or submission, and gotten neither, and it bothered her. She covered it quickly, but Clara had already seen it. Nathaniel showed Clara to the East Room himself, which Eleanor had not expected, and which meant Eleanor followed 3 steps behind them, making observations about the household schedule, the meal times, the social calendar for the month, the standards the family maintained, a sustained and detailed performance of everything Clara was expected to conform to. Clara listened to all of it without expression. At the door of the East Room, she turned to Eleanor and said, "I appreciate the thorough orientation, Mrs. Whitmore. I'll be down for dinner at 7. She closed the door. Nathaniel stood in the hallway with his sister-in-law and felt the temperature drop noticeably. "She's sharper than she looks," Eleanor said. "She's exactly as sharp as she looks," Nathaniel said. "Leave her alone, Eleanor. I'm simply acquainting her with how things are done here. I know what you're doing. Then you know it's necessary." Eleanor looked at him the way she always looked at him when she was about to say something she knew he wouldn't like and was going to say anyway. "Nathaniel, she is a pastor's daughter from Baltimore who sold her jewelry to pay for lodging. She doesn't know the first thing about what this family is expected to be. You have brought her here out of guilt, and she has come here out of desperation, and that is not a foundation for anything that will hold. The county will notice. The county will talk." "The county always talks," he said. "Let them." "That's easy to say," Eleanor replied. "You won't be the one sitting in the parlor when Margaret Alcott asks where Miss Bennet's family is from, and the answer is a church in a city that burned half down 3 years ago." Nathaniel said nothing. "I'm protecting this family," Eleanor said. "I always have." "I know," he said, and he walked away because the alternative was saying something he couldn't take back, and she wasn't wrong about all of it, and that was the most infuriating thing about Eleanor. She was never entirely wrong. Dinner was its own particular theater, the three of them at one end of a table built for 12. Eleanor asking Clara careful questions that were not careful at all, questions with edges dressed up in manners. How long had her father's congregation been? Had she ever traveled before? Did she read? What did she read? Scripture, Clara said pleasantly. Philosophy. Agricultural journals when I can find them. I've been interested in soil rotation since I read an account of what Washington was doing at Mount Vernon. Do you keep records of your yield by field, Mr. Whitmore? Nathaniel blinked. Yes, Thomas keeps the ledgers. I'd like to look at them if you don't mind. I have some thoughts about the lower acreage. Eleanor set her fork down. You have thoughts, Eleanor said, about the tobacco fields. I have thoughts about most things, Clara said. It's a habit I haven't been able to break. Miss Bennet. Eleanor's voice had gone to the place it went when she was truly displeased, which was very quiet and very precise. Whatever arrangement my brother-in-law has made with you, I want to be clear that the management of this estate is not part of it. You are here to... Eleanor. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. Nathaniel, I know what you're simply doing. He looked at her. The ledgers are available to Miss Bennet whenever she wants them. That's all. The silence that followed held 3 entirely different conversations in it. Eleanor heard hers. Clara heard hers. Nathaniel sat between them and felt the shape of what the next several months were going to look like, and was not particularly encouraged by it. After dinner, Clara found him on the back porch. You don't have to defend me, she said, coming to stand beside him. I know that. She'll resent you for it, and it'll make her worse with me when you're not present, which is most of the time. He turned to look at her. How do you know that? Because I've met women like Eleanor before. They don't fight the obstacle. They fight around it. She paused. Let me handle her. She's formidable, I know. So am I, Mr. Whitmore. She looked out at the dark. And I've been managing without anyone's help for 2 years. I think I can manage one woman who doesn't want me here. He thought about arguing. He thought about saying that Eleanor was more than one woman who didn't want someone there, that Eleanor had a particular talent for social destruction that had ended more than one reputation in this county. He thought about saying a great many things. All right, he said. She nodded once. Good night. She went back inside. He stood there in the dark for a while, listening to the Virginia summer, and thinking that Samuel had really genuinely undersold her. 3 days into Clara's arrival, Eleanor hosted a tea. 6 women. The particular 6 women who comprised the social architecture of the county, whose opinions moved through the community the way weather moved, touching everything before anyone saw it coming. Eleanor had timed it perfectly. Clara had not yet been seen enough to have formed her own impression. She was effectively blank paper, and Eleanor intended to write on her before she could write on herself. Clara understood this. She understood it from the moment the invitations were mentioned, with that particular lightness Eleanor used when she was most deliberate. She dressed in the best of what she had, which was not much, and she went downstairs and she sat at that tea table with 6 women who had all heard something from Eleanor in the preceding days and were watching to see if it was true. Margaret Alcott went first. "Miss Bennet, I understand you've come to us from Baltimore." "Yes, ma'am." "Forgive my asking, but your family, I don't believe I've met any Bennets from that city." "My father was a pastor," Clara said. "Samuel Bennet. He died 6 years ago." "A pastor's family," Margaret repeated with the particular intonation that made a fact into a verdict. "How interesting. And your mother?" "Also gone." Clara picked up her teacup with complete composure. "It's a very efficient family in that regard." One of the women laughed before she could stop herself. Margaret Alcott looked at her. She stopped. "We were sorry to hear about your brother." Another woman said, younger, a Mrs. Harrison, who seemed to have something more like genuine sympathy. "He served, didn't he? With Nathaniel?" "He did," Clara said. "He died at New Orleans." "A hero," Mrs. Harrison said. "You must be proud." "I'm proud," Clara said, "and I miss him every day." Those two things don't cancel each other out. The table had gone a little still. "Well," Eleanor said brightly, "more tea." But Mrs. Harrison was looking at Clara with something that had shifted. Something less like inspection and more like interest. "Tell me, Miss Bennet, I heard you asking Thomas about the field records yesterday. Are you interested in agriculture?" "I'm interested in anything that works," Clara said. "And I've read that nitrogen depletion in Virginia soil is becoming a significant problem for tobacco growers. I wondered if the Whitmore fields had seen reduced yields in the past 4 years." Silence. Then Mrs. Harrison, who was the wife of the largest competing landowner in the county, leaned forward. "We certainly have. My husband has been at his wits' end over it. There's an account by a farmer in Pennsylvania," Clara said, "who's been rotating with legumes between tobacco seasons. The yields in the 3rd year are considerably improved. I can write down the reference if you'd like." Eleanor was looking at Clara the way a chess player looks at the board when they realize the person across from them is better than expected. Her expression had not changed, but her hand, Clara noticed, had set down her teacup without a sound. After the women left Mrs. Harrison last, and warmly, Eleanor found Clara in the hallway. "That was well done," Eleanor said. Clara looked at her. "Thank you." "Don't mistake it for approval." Eleanor's voice was even. "Mrs. Harrison's goodwill is useful, yes, but this county has a long memory, and one successful tea doesn't establish anything. You're still a poor pastor's daughter from Baltimore, and you will be for a very long time, no matter how many agricultural references you provide." "I know that," Clara said. "Then why?" Eleanor stopped. Started again. "What do you want, Miss Bennet? Truly. Not the arrangement you've made with Nathaniel. What do you actually want from being here?" Clara considered the question with what seemed like genuine care. "I want to not be cold," she said. "I want to not be hungry. I want to read books without worrying about whether I can pay for the lamp oil." She looked at Eleanor directly. "And I want to be useful. I have spent 2 years being unable to be useful to anyone, including myself, and I found it unbearable." Eleanor looked at her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "People rarely are," Clara said. Eleanor made a small sound that was not quite a laugh, turned and walked away. Clara stood in the hallway alone and let out a slow breath. Then she went to find the ledgers. Nathaniel gave her the study without being asked. He moved his papers to a smaller room off the library and told Thomas that Miss Bennet was to have access to whatever she needed, and that was that. He watched her work from a careful distance over the following 2 weeks. She was methodical, quiet when she was thinking. She asked questions that were not obvious, not beginner questions, not showing-off questions, but the exact questions that went to the center of a problem. She had opinions, and she stated them plainly, And she was right about the lower acreage, which he found both useful and slightly humbling. He had breakfast with her most mornings. Not by arrangement, it simply happened that they were both early risers and the kitchen was the warmest room, and neither of them required conversation before coffee. "You sleep badly," she said one morning, without looking up from the document she was reading. He went still. "The floor above the kitchen," she said. "It creaks when someone walks on it. You've been up at 3 o'clock most nights this week." He stopped. "I didn't realize." "You don't have to explain it." She turned a page. "Samuel told me you were like that even before the war, that you'd be up at all hours walking the halls." "He told you that?" "He told me a great many things about you." She looked up then. Her eyes were steady. "He wrote letters, long ones. When a person's only family is a sister and a best friend, they tend to be thorough correspondents." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "What did he tell you?" "That you were the most stubborn man he'd ever met, and that you read military history the way other men read scripture, and that you always gave your rations to the youngest men in the unit and pretended you simply weren't hungry." She looked at him. "He admired you a great deal." Something moved through Nathaniel's chest that he had no word for. He looked at the table. The admiration was mutual. "I know." She turned another page. "The lower field. If we pull the eastern section out of rotation next spring and seed it with crimson clover, by the following season the nitrogen levels should be—" "Clara." She stopped, looked at him. It was the first time he'd used her given name since the pawn shop. She didn't correct him. "Thank you," he said, "for what you just told me." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the document. "You're welcome, Mr. Whitmore. Now let me finish my thought about the clover." He let her finish her thought. And he sat across from her in the kitchen in the early morning and thought about the fact that Samuel had described him to his sister in those particular words, gave his rations away, and pretended he wasn't hungry, and that she had held that information for years and was only now offering it to him like something she'd decided he needed in the most matter-of-fact way possible over agricultural ledgers. He thought Samuel knew exactly what he was doing when he made me promise. He thought I'm not sure I did. It was 12 days into Clara's time at Whitmore when Eleanor made her first real move. Not subtle. Eleanor was never subtle. When she'd decided something needed to be done, she was simply calculated about when and where and in front of whom. The occasion was a supper with Colonel Hargrove and his wife, neighbors of long standing, the kind of social dinner that happened 6 or 7 times a year and mattered, because Colonel Hargrove sat on 3 county boards and his wife talked to everyone. Eleanor had orchestrated the guest list and the conversation and waited until the second course to deploy what she had been preparing. "Miss Bennet," Hargrove's wife said pleasantly, "I understand you've been making quite an impression on the household since your arrival." "I've been trying to be useful," Clara said. "She's been absolutely remarkable," Eleanor said warmly. The warmth was the tell. Eleanor's genuine warmth was a rare thing. Deployed warmth was a weapon. "In fact, I was telling Colonel Hargrove just this week about how Miss Bennet has taken such a keen interest in the estate management. It reminded me so much of those charitable women who take positions in households of means. Governess's companions, that sort of arrangement. There's something genuinely admirable about it." The table understood immediately. Clara understood immediately. Hargrove's wife looked slightly uncomfortable. Hargrove examined his plate. Nathaniel said, "Miss Bennet is not in a position in this household, Eleanor." "Of course not." Eleanor said, still warm, still wrong. "I only mean that her dedication to—" "She is the woman I intend to marry," Nathaniel said, "which is what I have said from the beginning and which apparently requires repeating." The silence at that table had several layers in it. Clara had not reacted. She was cutting her meat with perfect composure, and Nathaniel could see, because he was watching her closely now, the precise effort that composure was costing her. "Miss Bennet," Colonel Hargrove said, apparently deciding that the safest thing was to speak to her directly. "You're Samuel Bennet's sister, the man who served with Nathaniel at New Orleans." "I am, sir," Clara said. Good man, Hargrove said. I heard the account. He paused. Something genuine came into his face. He was the kind of man the army makes once in a generation. You should be proud. I am, Clara said. And for just a moment the composure shifted, and she was simply a woman who had lost her brother and hadn't finished grieving him. Thank you for saying so. It was a small moment, but it was real. Hargrove saw it. His wife saw it. Eleanor Nathaniel noticed was already calculating what to do with it. After the Hargroves left, and Eleanor had retired, and the house had gone quiet, Clara found Nathaniel in the library. She's trying to make me look like the help, Clara said. No preamble. I know. She almost succeeded tonight. She didn't. No. Clara sat down. She looked tired in a way she didn't usually let show. She'll try again. Yes. And you can't keep defending me at dinner tables, Mr. Whitmore. It makes me look like I need defending. What would you have me do instead? I don't know yet. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. But Eleanor is not stupid, and I am not going to win by being defended. I need to... She stopped. Clara. She looked up. He was looking at her with an expression she didn't know what to do with. Not pity. Something more careful than pity. She intercepted your letters, he said. Not just to me. I found the correspondence this week she was writing back to you in my name, without my knowledge. Clara went very still. The letters that told you I was well, and would be in touch when circumstances allowed, he said. Those weren't from me. She stared at him. I didn't know until this week, he said. I found them in her correspondence box when she left it in the study. She wrote to me. Clara's voice was very quiet. For 2 years, pretending to be you. Yes. And you never. No. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood there with her back to him and said nothing for a long time. That's why I kept waiting, she said finally. The letters they were enough to keep me from leaving Baltimore. She told me you'd come when you were able. She told me Samuel had wanted me cared for. She told me everything that would keep me exactly where I was, not making connections, not making plans, just... Her voice stopped. Waiting, Nathaniel said. Waiting. She turned around. Her face was controlled, but her eyes were not. She kept me in Baltimore on purpose. Yes. Because if I never came here, there was no arrangement to worry about. Yes. She was managing me, Clara said, the same way she manages everyone, like a variable that needed to be contained. Yes, he said. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for things other people have done. Stop telling me what to... It's my anger, she said sharply. Don't apologize it away from me. I've earned every inch of it. He stopped. She was right. He knew she was right, the way you know a thing in your chest before you can think it through. She had been held in place for 2 years by a woman she'd never met through letters she'd believed were from a man who had promised her brother to look after her. She had sold her mother's ring. She had been cold and hungry in a boarding house in Baltimore, and all the while, Eleanor had been here warm in this house managing the situation. The anger he felt on her behalf was considerable, but it was hers first. What do you want to do? He said quietly. I want to go to bed, she said. And I want to think. And in the morning, I want to continue with the ledgers, because the lower acreage is a real problem, and it predates Eleanor, and it will outlast this conversation. All right. And I want you to leave her correspondence box where she left it, Clara said. Don't tell her you found it. Not yet. He looked at her. Why? Because I want her to think she's still ahead of us, Clara said. She's more dangerous when she knows she's losing. She left him standing in the library. He stood there for a while in the dark, with the letter drawer open in his mind, and the sound of Clara's voice saying, "It's my anger," and thought that he was going to have to recalibrate everything he had assumed about what this arrangement was going to be. He had brought her here to honor a debt. He was beginning to suspect the debt was nowhere near as simple as he'd thought. The nightmares came 4 nights later. He'd had them since New Orleans. He was used to waking to the sound of his own voice, not screaming, never that, but speaking urgent and low to men who were no longer there. He was used to walking it off in the halls, the kitchen, the back porch, wherever the walls stopped, feeling like they were pressing in. What he was not used to was finding someone already awake when he came downstairs. Clara was at the kitchen table with a candle and a book she was not reading. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway. She took in the state of him, the expression, the tension through his shoulders, the way he was holding himself like something that needed to be kept contained, and she said nothing. He sat down across from her. She turned a page of her book. He looked at the table. After a while she said, "Do you want coffee?" "It's 4 a.m. "I know what time it is. Do you want coffee?" "Yes," he said. She got up and made it. She put a cup in front of him and sat back down and went back to the book she wasn't reading. He drank the coffee. The walls stopped pressing. After a long time, he said, "I hear them, in the dream, the men who didn't come back." She didn't look up. "Samuel." "Sometimes." He paused. "Often." She turned another page. "He would hate that," she said. "He would absolutely hate the idea of being someone else's nightmare. He'd say that was the most inconsiderate thing he'd ever heard of." Nathaniel made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was the closest he'd been to one in longer than he could remember. "He'd say worse than that," Nathaniel said. "Probably the word ornery would come up. Probably several times." She looked up then, across the table. In the candlelight, her face was softer than he'd seen it, not less formidable, but less defended. Like a door that had been pulled to without being locked. "It wasn't your fault," she said. "Clara, I know you're going to tell me it was. I know you've been telling yourself that for 2 years, and you believe it completely." She held his gaze. "I'm telling you it wasn't. Samuel made a choice. It was a Samuel kind of choice, and if you told him he was wrong, he would have argued with you until you gave up from sheer exhaustion." She paused. "He didn't die because you were weak, Nathaniel. He died because he loved you. Those are not the same thing." Nathaniel set down his cup. Something behind his eyes was doing something he had not allowed it to do in a very long time. He pressed it back, mostly. "You are," he said carefully, "nothing like what I expected." "Samuel told me that's what everyone says." "What did he tell you to say back to it?" "He said to say I know." She almost smiled. He thought it was the correct answer to most things. She closed her book. She stood up. She looked at him across the kitchen table in the 4 o'clock dark, with the candle between them. "Go back to sleep, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "The lower field isn't going to fix itself, and I need you awake enough to authorize the Clover order." She picked up the candle. She left him there in the dark, and Nathaniel sat at the kitchen table in the dark Virginia summer and felt for the first time in 2 years something shift in his chest that was not guilt. Not quite. Something adjacent to it. Something that had a little more warmth in it than guilt generally allowed. He did not know what to call it yet, but he thought Samuel, wherever Samuel was, probably knew exactly what it was, and was finding the whole thing deeply satisfying. The Clover order was authorized on a Thursday. By Friday, the lower field crew had their instructions. By Saturday morning, Mrs. Harrison had sent a note asking if Miss Bennett might be available to discuss the rotation method with her husband's land manager the following week, because Harrison had been losing yield for 3 years running and nothing his own people tried had worked. Clara read the note at breakfast. She passed it across the table to Nathaniel without comment. He read it. "You've made an ally," he said. "I've solved a crop problem," she said. "It's not the same thing, though I'll take both." Eleanor watched this exchange from her end of the table and said nothing. That silence, Nathaniel had learned over the past weeks, was its own kind of statement. Eleanor silent was Eleanor thinking, and Eleanor thinking was generally a prelude to something he wasn't going to like. He was right. He just didn't know yet how badly right he was. What changed between Nathaniel and Clara happened the way most real things happen, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small ones that you only recognize as significant when you look back at them. The kitchen at 4 a.m. The way she handed him documents without preamble, as if they had been working together for years. The morning she corrected something he said about the northern boundary deed, and was right. And he said so, and she looked at him like she'd expected an argument, and didn't know what to do with agreement. The morning he laughed. He couldn't even remember afterward what she had said. Something about Eleanor's opinion of the new cook. Something dry and perfectly timed. But he laughed, actually laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere you'd forgotten you had, and the sound of it surprised them both. Clara stared at him for a full second. Then she looked back at her coffee and said very carefully, "You should do that more often." "What?" "Sound like a person." He looked at her. "That was not an insult," she said. "It was an observation." "I know," he said. "I'm not sure what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything with it." She stood, collected her papers. "Just don't stop on my account." She left him at the table. He sat there for a moment in the ordinary summer morning of it and thought, this is how it happens. Not grand gestures, not declarations, just coffee and crop rotation, and a woman telling you that you sound like a person and meaning it as the highest possible compliment. He thought, I am in considerably more trouble than I accounted for. Eleanor saw it happening. Of course she did. Eleanor saw everything that moved through this house, had seen it for 4 years. Would see it until the day she left, or the day she died, whichever came first. She saw the way Nathaniel's posture changed when Clara came into a room. Nothing dramatic, nothing even visible to the untrained eye. Just a slight easing, like a door opening a fraction of an inch. She saw the way Clara tracked him in conversation, that precise attention she gave to things she found worth understanding. She saw, and she went to the study, while both of them were walking the fields with Thomas, and she went to the locked box in the bottom drawer of Nathaniel's desk, and she used the key she had copied 3 years ago when she first understood that Nathaniel's secrets were better managed by her than by him. She found the letters, his correspondence from the regiment, field dispatches, a handful of personal notes from officers, and 3 letters folded separately in Samuel Bennett's handwriting. She read all 3. She sat in the study for a long time after that. Then she put them back exactly as she found them, locked. The box replaced the key in her pocket and went to write 2 letters of her own. Clara found out about Eleanor's letters the way most bad news arrives sideways from a direction you weren't watching. Mrs. Harrison came to call on a Wednesday earlier than expected without her husband. She asked to speak to Clara alone, which was unusual enough that Clara knew before they'd sat down that something had shifted. "I want to tell you myself," Mrs. Harrison said, "before you hear it from someone less inclined to be kind about it." Clara set down her cup. "Tell me what?" "There's talk." Mrs. Harrison's face was uncomfortable. She was not an unkind woman, and she was finding this particular duty genuinely difficult. "About Mr. Whitmore, about New Orleans. Someone has been there, have been letters. Sent to Colonel Hargrove, to the Alcotts, to Reverend Moore, which I think was deliberately chosen because Reverend Moore speaks to everyone in 3 counties. Clara's hands were still in her lap. "What kind of letters?" "The kind that say Nathaniel Whitmore was responsible for the death of Samuel Bennett, that he gave a cowardly order, that Samuel died not as a hero, but trying to correct his commanding officer's mistake." Mrs. Harrison looked at her steadily. "The kind of letter that, if believed, would destroy a man's reputation in this county and in Richmond both." The room was very quiet. "Who sent them?" Clara said. Mrs. Harrison looked at her with an expression that said she knew exactly who had sent them and was not going to say it directly, but that she trusted Clara to arrive at the same conclusion without her having to. Clara arrived at it. "How far has it spread?" Clara said. "Far enough. Hargrove is furious. He served. He takes these things personally." Mrs. Harrison paused. "Clara, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you tell me stays with me." "Ask." "Is it true what the letters say?" Clara looked at her. She thought about sitting in a pawn shop in Baltimore. She thought about a kitchen at 4 in the morning, and coffee, and a man who couldn't sleep. And a laugh she hadn't expected. and the way he'd said among other things when she asked him why he'd come back. She thought about 2 years of letters she'd received that weren't from him, holding her in place, keeping her waiting, written by a woman sitting in this house, managing everyone like variables. She thought about Samuel, who had gone back for a man he loved and made a choice, and would have made it again. "No," Clara said. "It is not true." Mrs. Harrison let out a breath. "Then you need to tell me what is true. Because if Nathaniel doesn't answer this, Hargrove will bring it to Richmond. And if it reaches Richmond—" "I know what happens if it reaches Richmond," Clara said. She stood up. She thanked Mrs. Harrison. She showed her out. Then she went to find Nathaniel. She found him in the north field with Thomas, and she walked out there without stopping to think about the heat or the distance, or the fact that she was still wearing her morning dress. And she said, "Come with me. Now. Please." He looked at her face and came immediately. She didn't speak until they were in the library, with the door closed. Then she told him what Mrs. Harrison had told her. She watched him as she talked, watched his face go through several things very quickly, surprise, then recognition, then something cold and hard that settled in behind his eyes and stayed there. "Eleanor," he said. "Yes." She found the correspondence box. "She's had a key for years, I'd wager," Clara said. "The copy was probably made the same week your brother died." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "How bad is it?" "Hargrove, the Alcotts, Reverend Moore." He closed his eyes. "Nathaniel." Her voice was quiet but direct. "I need you to tell me what happened at New Orleans. All of it. Not the version you gave me in Baltimore, the real version. Whatever you left out." He opened his eyes. "I told you the truth. You told me Samuel went back for you and died. I believe that. But there's something you didn't say. I could feel it then, and I can feel it now, and I need to know what it is before Eleanor's version becomes the only version people have to work with." He looked at her for a long time. Then he sat down. "There was an order," he said, "the night before the assault. A tactical decision about where to position the unit. I was given 2 options and I chose one of them." He stopped. "The position I chose was wrong. I knew it might be wrong when I chose it. I chose it anyway because the intelligence we had suggested it doesn't matter what the intelligence suggested. I was wrong, and the men I put in that position took fire from an angle we hadn't anticipated, and Samuel was one of those men, and when I went down, Samuel came back for me." He looked at the table. "If I had chosen differently, Samuel would not have been in the field where he died." Clara said nothing. "That's what Eleanor's letters say," he said. "Approximately, with considerably less restraint." "But it wasn't cowardice," Clara said. "It was a mistake. A military error made under incomplete information is not the same as cowardice. In the court of public opinion—" "I'm not asking about the court of public opinion," she said sharply. "I'm asking you. Was it cowardice?" He met her eyes. "No." "Then say so. To Hargrove. To anyone who'll listen. Say it plainly and don't apologize for the parts that don't require apology. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple." She leaned forward. "Nathaniel, Eleanor has spent 2 years managing this family's reputation by keeping inconvenient people at a distance. She kept me in Baltimore with forged letters. She's tried to make me look like the help in my own house. And now she sent private military correspondence to men with political influence in order to destroy you before I can stabilize my position here enough to be a threat to hers." She paused. "This is not about New Orleans. This is about the estate. About what she loses if this marriage becomes real." He stared at her. "The inheritance. Your brother left it to you with Eleanor's right of residence," Clara said. "That right is contingent on your goodwill. If you're socially and politically destroyed, if Richmond strips your commission, if the county turns, you might sell. You might leave. Eleanor has managed this estate for 4 years, and she intends to manage it for 40 more, and I am the most direct threat to that she's ever faced." She looked at him steadily. "Because I'm not going anywhere." The library was very quiet. "You're not going anywhere," he repeated. "No." Something moved through his face. He was looking at her the way he'd looked at her at 4 in the morning over coffee, with that particular expression she'd begun to recognize as Nathaniel Whitmore, when he had run out of ways to keep himself at a measured distance. "Clara." "Don't," she said. Her voice was soft, not unkind, just careful. "Don't say something we're not ready for yet. There's a more immediate problem." He straightened, back to the situation. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go see Eleanor," she said. "Alone." "Absolutely not. Nathaniel." "She's not above saying things that—" "I know what she's capable of." Clara stood. "That's why I need to be alone. You in that room will make her defensive and strategic. Me in that room, she'll underestimate. She still thinks I'm a poor pastor's daughter who stumbled into a situation above her ability to manage." She looked at him. Let her keep thinking that. He wanted to argue. She could see it, the instinct to protect the guilt that had been running his decisions for 2 years, the particular stubbornness that Samuel had described in letters, and that she had seen operate at close range for 6 weeks now. He let her go. It cost him something visible. But he let her go. Clara found Eleanor in the sitting room. She closed the door behind her. She sat down across from her and folded her hands in her lap and said nothing, which she knew from experience was a more effective opening than any words could be. Eleanor waited. Then, "I wondered when you'd come." "Did you wonder, or were you counting on it?" Clara said. Eleanor looked at her. Something shifted in her expression. Not guilt. Eleanor was not built for guilt, but a recalibration, like a general acknowledging that the enemy had advanced further than expected. "You're here to tell me I've made a mistake," Eleanor said. "No," Clara said. "I'm here to tell you that you've made your position very clear, and I want to be equally clear about mine. Which is, I know about the letters, I know about the key, I know about the correspondence you sent to Baltimore over 2 years in Nathaniel's name." Clara's voice was level and completely without heat. "I know that every move you've made since I arrived here has been designed to ensure that I fail, that I embarrass myself, that I prove inadequate, that I give Nathaniel a reason to end this arrangement before it costs you anything." Eleanor said nothing. "I also know," Clara continued, "that you love this estate, not as a possession, as a responsibility. You have managed it well, and you have protected it. And I think in your way, you have protected Nathaniel too, even when protecting him has meant controlling him in ways he would not have chosen." She paused. "I'm not here to take that from you." Eleanor's expression shifted fractionally. "What are you here for then?" "I'm here to tell you that the letters you sent to Hargrove and the others are going to destroy Nathaniel unless someone provides a counter-account, and that the only person who can credibly provide that account is Samuel Bennett's sister." Silence. "I'm going to Hargrove," Clara said. "I'm going to tell him what Samuel told me in his letters about New Orleans. About Nathaniel's leadership, and about the nature of the decision that was made, and about the kind of man my brother was following and why." She held Eleanor's gaze. "I'm going to rehabilitate Nathaniel's reputation, not because you deserve it, not because this marriage has become what either of us intended, but because Samuel loved him, and Samuel was right about him, and he doesn't deserve to be destroyed by a woman who is afraid of losing a house." Eleanor's chin came up. "This is not about a house." "Then what is it about?" "It's about what this family is." Eleanor's voice finally broke its perfect composure, not into softness, but into something harder and more genuine. "Nathaniel's brother built this estate. I ran it. For 4 years I have kept it functioning and respected and viable, while Nathaniel came home from the war, unable to sleep and unable to speak and barely able to put one foot in front of the other. I held this together." She leaned forward. "And you come here with one trunk and no family and no connections and no understanding of what it has cost to keep this place standing, and you sit in the study and read the ledgers and act as though you've arrived at something you deserve. You don't deserve it. You stumbled into it." Clara looked at her. "You are right," Clara said quietly. Eleanor blinked. "I stumbled into it. I came here out of desperation, and you are right that I didn't earn it." Clara paused. "But neither did you. You kept this house standing, and I respect that. You loved it, and that's real. But you forged letters to a grieving woman for 2 years to keep her isolated and desperate, and you've sent private correspondence to damage the reputation of a man who trusted you, and there is no version of loving this estate that makes those things justified." She stood. "I'm not your enemy, Mrs. Whitmore. I am not here to take anything from you, but I will not be managed out of this house, and I will not allow Nathaniel to be destroyed by someone who believes the stakes give her the right to do anything she chooses." She walked to the door. "Clara." Eleanor's voice stopped her. First time she'd used her given name. Clara turned. Eleanor's face was different. Not soft, Eleanor did not go soft, but something in it had come down like a wall that was still standing, but had lost a stone somewhere near the top. "Those letters I sent to you," Eleanor said. "In Nathaniel's name, what did they say?" "That he was recovering. That Samuel had been a good man and was missed. That he would come when he was able." Clara looked at her steadily. "They were kind letters. You wrote them kindly. I think that was the worst part. They were written by someone who understood exactly how much I needed to believe them." Eleanor looked away. "I'll be at Hargrove's tomorrow morning," Clara said. "If you have anything you'd like to add to my account, you're welcome to put it in writing, and I'll present it alongside mine." She opened the door. "Miss Bennet." Eleanor's voice had gone somewhere quieter. Nathaniel has not been well. Since the war. You understand that?" "I understand it very well," Clara said. "He needs—" Eleanor stopped, seemed to be choosing. "He needs someone who doesn't require him to perform recovery. Who lets him be broken without making it mean something it doesn't mean." Clara looked at her for a moment. "I know," she said. She left. Nathaniel was waiting in the hallway. He straightened when he saw her face. "What happened?" "Nothing I didn't expect." She moved past him. "I need paper and ink. I'm writing to Hargrove tonight to request a meeting tomorrow." "Clara, you don't have to. Samuel's letters mentioned you by name 47 times in 3 years of correspondence." She stopped and turned. 47. I counted. I know what he wrote about you, and I know what New Orleans actually looked like from the ground. And I know the difference between a cowardly order and a tactical error made under bad intelligence, and I am going to explain that difference to Colonel Hargrove in terms he cannot misunderstand. She met his eyes. "This is not about you, Nathaniel. This is about Samuel. I am not letting Eleanor decide what my brother's death meant." He was very still. "Get me the paper," she said. He got her the paper. She wrote for 2 hours. He sat across from her in the study, not talking, not asking, just present, in the way she had come to recognize as his particular form of steadiness, the stillness that was not absence, but attention. When she finished, she read it back to herself and made 2 corrections and sealed it and set it on the desk. "Satisfied?" he asked. "No," she said, "but it's honest and it's enough." She rubbed her eyes. "Go to sleep, Nathaniel." "Will you?" "I'm fine," she said. "Go to sleep." He went. She sat in the study a while longer. She took her mother's ring out of her pocket. She'd been carrying it since Baltimore, not wearing it, just keeping it close the way you keep things that belong to people you've lost. She turned it in her fingers. She thought about Eleanor's face when she'd said those letters I sent to you. Not remorse. Eleanor would not do remorse, but something. Recognition, maybe, of what she'd done, of what it had cost someone who had already lost too much. She thought about Nathaniel saying, "I was afraid of you." She thought about what it meant that a man who had walked into rifle fire in 3 separate engagements had been afraid of a pastor's daughter from Baltimore. She thought about 47 letters. She thought about Samuel, who had known everyone's heart better than they knew it themselves, who had gone back into a field of fire, not out of impulse, but out of knowledge, who knew exactly what he was choosing, and chose it anyway. She put the ring back in her pocket. She went upstairs. She passed Nathaniel's door, and heard nothing. No footsteps, no low voice, the silence of someone who had for once actually managed to sleep. She stood outside it for a moment. Just a moment. Then she went to her room. She had been lying in the dark for perhaps an hour when she heard it. Not Nathaniel. He was still. She'd listened long enough to know. Something else. A sound in the hallway below. A door. She got up. The study door was open. The lamp was lit. Eleanor was standing at the desk. She was holding the letter Clara had written. She had not broken the seal. She was holding it sealed, reading nothing, just holding it. When she heard Clara in the doorway, she did not startle Eleanor. Never startled, but she set the letter down with the particular care of someone who has decided not to do something they'd been considering. They looked at each other across the study in the lamplight. "I wasn't going to take it," Eleanor said. "I know," Clara said. She wasn't entirely sure that was true, but she said it anyway. Eleanor looked at the letter. "He was my brother-in-law's best friend," she said. "Before the war. Before all of it. He came here every summer for 6 years, and he ate at this table, and he drove Eleanor absolutely mad with his opinions about everything." She stopped. "Samuel Bennett was the finest man I'd ever met who wasn't born to money. I want you to know I believe that." Clara said nothing. "And when he died," Eleanor said, "and Nathaniel came home the way he did wrong. Broken, not sleeping, barely here. I thought, I am not going to let this estate go down with him. I am not going to let some woman from nowhere marry him out of his property while he's too damaged to see clearly." She met Clara's eyes. "I was protecting him." "You were protecting the estate," Clara said. "Both," Eleanor said. "Both things can be true." Clara crossed to the desk. She picked up the letter. She looked at Eleanor. "You can come with me to Hargrove," she said, "if you want, as a witness to the family's account." Eleanor blinked. "You're inviting me." "I'm telling you the offer stands. The choice is yours." Clara moved toward the door. "Good night, Mrs. Whitmore." She went back to her room. She lay down in the dark. She listened to the summer night and thought about choices and what they cost and what they were worth and what Samuel would say if he could see any of this. She thought he would say something about it being extremely inconvenient and laugh about it, which was the only way he'd ever known how to love things that hurt. She did not sleep for a very long time. In the morning, when the carriage was brought around at 9 o'clock, Eleanor Whitmore came down the front steps in her best dress, with her spine straight and her chin level, and she got in the carriage without a word and sat across from Clara and looked out the window. Nathaniel stood at the door and watched them go, and did not know whether to be terrified or grateful. Thomas, standing beside him, said, "You know what those two together could do to this county?" "Yes," Nathaniel said. Thomas nodded slowly. "Thought you did." The carriage disappeared down the road. Nathaniel went back inside. He went to the study. He sat at the desk where Clara had written for 2 hours the night before, where Eleanor had stood in the lamplight holding a letter she'd decided not to take, and he thought about the way things sometimes turn without warning, not dramatically, not with the sound of rifle fire, but quietly, like a door pushed open from the inside by someone who'd been waiting long enough to know the exact right moment. He thought about Clara saying, "I'm not going anywhere." He thought he had not believed her when she said it. He thought he believed her now. He thought that belief, after 2 years of not being able to hold on to much of anything, felt like something close to the ground, something that could be stood on. He was still sitting there when the carriage came back 3 hours later, and Clara walked in with dust on her hem and something resolved in her face, and she stopped in the study doorway and said, "Hargrove is satisfied. He's writing to the others. Eleanor was—" She paused. Eleanor was effective. What did she say? She told Hargrove that she had written the letters out of a misguided attempt to protect the family's reputation, and that they did not accurately represent the account given to her by Nathaniel regarding the events at New Orleans. Clara paused. She said it like it was nothing, like it cost her nothing, but it cost her a great deal, and she did it anyway. Nathaniel stared. Eleanor admitted she sent the letters. To Hargrove, yes. Eleanor never admits anything. I know, Clara said. She looked like she'd swallowed something that disagreed with her for the entirety of the conversation. She crossed her arms. "Nathaniel, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer it honestly." "All right. Are you ever going to stop punishing yourself for New Orleans?" The question landed in the room and stayed there. He looked at her. She was standing in his study doorway with dust on her dress and something in her eyes that was not pity and not patience and not the careful distance she had maintained since Baltimore. It was something more direct than any of those things, something that required an honest answer. "I don't know," he said. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me in 6 weeks," she said. "I've been trying to be honest with you since Baltimore. You've been trying to manage how honest you are. That's not the same thing." She looked at him. "Samuel didn't die so that you could spend the rest of your life as his penance. He died because he loved you, and he made a choice, and you are alive, and I need you to be alive, not to be a monument to the fact that you survived." She stopped, seemed to hear what she'd just said. Something moved across her face. "I need you to be alive," she repeated more quietly. He said her name, not Miss Bennett, her name. She held up one hand. "Don't," she said, soft, not afraid, just not ready. "Not yet. Clara, I mean it." She was looking at him with an expression that was very open and very controlled, at the same time the way you hold something fragile when you're not sure yet if your hands are steady enough. "There are things I need to think, about what I said, about what any of this—" She stopped. "Take whatever time you need," he said. She looked at him. He had said those words to her in Baltimore over a ring on a pawnshop counter, and they had meant something transactional then. They did not mean something transactional now. She heard the difference. "Good night, Nathaniel," she said, even though it was mid-morning. She walked past him down the hall and up the stairs. He sat in the study for a long time, with the summer pressing against the windows and the sound of the estate going on around him, and the shape of what had just happened, settling into something he did not yet have the right words for. He thought he might need to find them soon. He thought she already had hers and was simply deciding whether to say them. He thought that was without question the most terrifying and the most hopeful thing he had felt in 2 years. She avoided him for 2 days, not dramatically, not with doors slammed or meals missed. She was at breakfast, she was at dinner. She answered when spoken to and asked sensible questions about the field rotation and thanked Eleanor briefly and without ceremony for what she had done at Hargrove's. She was present in every room she entered. She simply did not look at him the way she had looked at him in the study doorway. She had pulled something back, and he could feel its absence the way you feel a window that's been closed in a room you'd gotten used to having open. He did not push. He had said, "Take whatever time you need," and he meant it even when meaning it was difficult, even when he sat across from her at the breakfast table and watched her read and thought about. "I need you to be alive," and had to put considerable effort into appearing as though he was doing anything other than replaying those 5 words on a continuous rotation. Thomas noticed. Thomas always noticed. He said nothing, which was one of the primary reasons Nathaniel had trusted him for 12 years. Eleanor noticed too. She said on the second evening passing Nathaniel in the hall, "She's not retreating, she's thinking. There is a difference, and you would do well to learn it." Then she went to her room and closed the door. He stood in the hallway and thought that Eleanor Whitmore, who had forged correspondence and manipulated a grieving woman and sent damaging letters to half the county, was occasionally and infuriatingly correct about things that mattered. On the 3rd morning, Clara did not come down to breakfast. He waited. Thomas waited. The coffee went cold. He was considering whether to send someone up when he heard her on the stairs, not her usual pace, something slower, more deliberate. He turned. She was carrying a box, small wooden, the kind used for correspondence storage. He recognized it immediately because he had given it to Samuel the summer before the war, a practical gift that Samuel had accepted with the observation that Nathaniel had the gift-giving instincts of a man twice his age. "Where did you get that?" Nathaniel said. "Your brother's storage room," Clara said. "Eleanor showed me where it was, yesterday." She set it on the table. "Samuel's letters. The ones he sent home before New Orleans. My father kept them. When my father died, they came to me, and when I left Baltimore, I brought them." She looked at Nathaniel. "I've read most of them many times, but there were 3 at the bottom I couldn't open." He said nothing. "I opened them last night," she said. She sat down. She put her hands flat on the table on either side of the box, and she looked at him with an expression he had never seen on her before. Not the composure, not the measuring steadiness, not even the unguarded quality of 4 in the morning. Something more open than any of those. Something that had clearly cost her the better part of 2 sleepless days to arrive at. "He wrote about you," she said, "in all 3. Clara, let me finish." She took a breath. "He wrote about the man you were before the war, the way you argued about military strategy until 2 in the morning and lost half the time, and admitted it, which he said was the rarest quality he'd ever encountered in an officer. The way you gave your rations to the youngest soldiers and then complained loudly about the quality of the food, so no one would notice you weren't eating." She stopped. "He wrote about a night in the Georgia camp when 3 men in your unit got word from home that their families had lost everything, farms gone, debts called. And you sat up with all 3 of them until morning and said nothing useful and stayed anyway, because you understood that sometimes staying is the only thing that helps." Nathaniel was looking at the table. "He wrote in the second letter," Clara continued, and her voice was doing something careful now, something that required effort to keep level, "that if anything happened to him, he wanted me to find you. Not because you could help me. He was clear about that. He said you'd probably make a mess of it and say the wrong thing 3 times before you said anything right." She almost smiled. Almost. "He said to find you because you would need someone who already knew what he was. Someone he trusted to see you clearly when you couldn't see yourself." The room was very quiet. "He wasn't sending me to you to be saved," she said. "He was sending me to you to save you." Nathaniel looked up. "He knew," she said. "He knew he might not come back. He wrote that letter knowing it might be the last one, and what he spent it on was making sure I understood that you were going to be in trouble and that I was the person he trusted to—" She stopped. "He said Clara will argue with him. That's what he needs. Someone who won't let him make his guilt into his whole personality." She looked at him directly. Those were his words. Nathaniel said nothing for a long time. His jaw was tight. His hands flat on the table were not quite steady. "He never told me he wrote that," he said finally. "He wouldn't have." She paused. "It wasn't for you. It was instructions. For me. He was even dying. He was making sure everyone was going to be all right." Her voice broke on the last word. Just slightly. She pulled it back. "That was the most Samuel thing he could possibly have done. And I am so angry at him for it. And I love him so much, and I don't know what to do with either of those things." "You don't have to do anything with them," Nathaniel said quietly. "You just have to let them both be true." She looked at him. He had said her own words back to her, the ones she'd said to Mrs. Harrison months ago. Proud and grieving. Those 2 things don't cancel each other out. He hadn't been there when she said it. He was saying it now because it was true, and because she needed to hear it, and because whatever else he was, he had been paying attention. Her eyes were bright. She was not a woman who cried easily, and she was not crying now, but she was closer to it than he'd ever seen her. "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes." "I owe you an apology." He blinked. "For what?" "For 2 years of letters I sent to an address in Virginia assuming you were deliberately ignoring me." She held his gaze. "I know now that Eleanor intercepted them. But before I knew that I was furious at you. I was furious in a way that felt righteous and certain, and I held it like something I was owed." She paused. "You weren't ignoring me. You were barely surviving. And I was so angry at you for surviving instead of Samuel that I needed you to be guilty of something I could name." He stared at her. "That's not—" He stopped. Started again. "Clara, you had every reason to—" "I'm not asking you to excuse it," she said. "I'm telling you it was there. The anger. Not just at Eleanor. At you. For being alive when he wasn't." She looked at her hands. And then I came here, and you turned out to be exactly what Samuel said you were, which made the anger harder to hold, and I have spent the past several weeks trying to stay angry because it was safer than the alternative." "What's the alternative?" he said. She looked up. "You," she said. Just that. One word the same way she had said, "don't" in a pawn shop in Baltimore, simply directly as if naming a thing was the most natural action in the world, even when the thing being named was enormous. The kitchen was very quiet. The summer morning pressed against the windows. Somewhere outside, Thomas was talking to one of the field hands, his voice a low, familiar murmur. And the estate was going on the way it always went on, ordinary and continuous, regardless of what happened in the rooms inside it. Nathaniel stood up. He crossed to where she was sitting. He did not reach for her hand. He did not say anything practiced or managed. He sat down in the chair beside her and put his elbows on the table and pressed his face into his hands. She heard his breathing change. Not crying, not quite, but close. The sound of a man who has been carrying something at load-bearing weight for 2 years and has just been told he can set it down. She put her hand on his arm. Not a grand gesture. Just her hand on his arm, steady and present, the way you hold something you are not afraid of losing. He stayed like that for a long moment. When he lifted his head, his face was open in a way she'd never seen. No management, no careful distance. Just the thing underneath all of it, which turned out to be something quite simple. Something quite tired. Something that had been trying to get through for a very long time. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Do what?" "Let someone—" He stopped. "I've been alone in this house with my guilt for so long that I don't know how to—" "You don't have to know how," she said. "You just have to stop preventing it." He looked at her. "That's all Samuel ever did," she said. "He didn't know how to make things better either. He just stopped standing in the way of them getting better. He stayed. He showed up. He made coffee at 4 in the morning and didn't ask questions." She held his gaze. "Sound familiar?" Something moved through his face that was almost a smile, and far more than one. "You've been doing it right this whole time," she said. "You just wouldn't let yourself see it." "Clara!" His voice was rough, careful. "I need to tell you something." "All right. When I came to Baltimore, it wasn't only guilt. I told you that at the time, and you said it was the most honest thing I'd said, and you were right. But I also told you there were other things, and I didn't name them because I didn't have the right to name them, and I'm still not certain I do. But I'm going to name them anyway because Samuel apparently sent you here specifically, so someone would make me stop being a coward about the things that matter." She waited. "I came to Baltimore because I had been thinking about you for 2 years, he said. "Not only as Samuel's sister, not only as a debt I owed. I came because Samuel had told me who you were for 3 years, and I had thought about you the way you think about a door you're not sure you're allowed to open. Continuously. And then I walked into that pawn shop, and you turned around and looked at me like I was something between a ghost and a problem. And I thought, yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly her." He paused. "I proposed badly." "You proposed terribly," she agreed. "I know. I am aware. The timing, the location, the complete absence of—" "You were panicking," she said. "I was panicking," he confirmed. "I still am somewhat." "I know," she said. "I can tell. You get very formal when you're panicking." "Do I?" "You called me Miss Bennett 4 times in one sentence the other week." He looked at her. She looked back. And then she laughed, a real one, not the careful, almost smile she'd been allowing herself for weeks. But an actual laugh surprised out of her, and the sound of it in the kitchen was the best thing he had heard in longer than he could account for. He felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was still held. "I would like to try again," he said. "If you're willing." "Try what again?" "Proposing." He said it simply. "Not out of guilt. Not because of what I owe Samuel. Because I would like very much for you to stay. Not in the arrangement we discussed in Baltimore. Something real." He held her gaze. "I understand if the answer is still no. I understand if you need more time, or if this is not—" "Yes," she said. He stopped. That's my answer, she said. Yes. You didn't let me finish. You were going to say something that would take 3 more sentences to get to the question. I already knew the question. She looked at him steadily. Yes, Nathaniel. He was quiet for a moment. Then, just like that. I've been thinking about it for 3 days. It wasn't just like that at all. It was extremely labor-intensive. She straightened. But the answer is yes. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not elaborate. Just his hand over hers, the way she had put her hand on his arm, simple and steady, the kind of contact that says, I'm here, without requiring anything more complicated than that. I'm going to keep getting it wrong, he said. There are going to be mornings when I'm not. I know that. And you should know that Eleanor is not going to simply... Eleanor and I have an understanding, Clara said. He looked at her. When did that happen? Gradually, she said. The way most real things happen. She turned her hand over under his, not pulling away, just shifting so their palms were together. She came to my room this morning, before I came down. What did she say? She said she had something that belonged to me. Clara reached into her pocket with her free hand. She placed something on the table between them. A letter folded, sealed with a wax stamp he recognized immediately. She said she'd found it in the correspondence she intercepted from Baltimore, that she'd kept it because she wasn't sure what to do with it, and then couldn't figure out how to give it back without admitting what she'd done. Nathaniel looked at the letter. Samuel's handwriting on the front. Clara's name, a Baltimore address, the stamp of the regiment at New Orleans. It was sent after he died, Clara said quietly. The regiment forwarded his personal effects and his final correspondence. Eleanor intercepted it with the rest. She's had it for 2 years, Nathaniel said. She had it for 2 years, Clara said. And this morning she knocked on my door and gave it to me and said she was sorry. Not elaborately, not with explanation, just, I'm sorry. This was yours. She looked at the letter. I haven't opened it yet. He understood immediately. Do you want me to leave? No, she said. I want you to stay. She picked up the letter. She broke the seal. She read it. He watched her face as she read the control. The effort, the way it shifted and shifted again through things he couldn't name from the outside. Her eyes moved slowly. She read it through once. Then she started again from the top. When she set it down, her face was wet. She hadn't noticed. She noticed now, pressed the back of her hand to her cheek with a practical motion, looked at him. He says, she began, stopped. He says he went back because he couldn't explain to me why he let Nathaniel die if he could have stopped it. She paused. He says, tell him I don't regret it. Tell him I went back because that's what you do for the people you love, and because I knew if I didn't, he'd spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to me, and I couldn't stand the thought of that. He already carries too much. Don't let him carry me too. She stopped. Her voice was steady, but barely. And then he says, find Nathaniel. Argue with him. Make him laugh. He needs someone who knows what he is. I think that someone is you. I think it has been for a while. He's just too stubborn to have figured that out yet. The kitchen was so quiet that the summer outside felt very far away. Nathaniel's throat was tight. He did not trust his voice. He tried anyway. That sounds like him. It sounds exactly like him, she said. Insufferably perceptive, right about everything, giving instructions from beyond the grave as though we can't manage a single thing without his input. We clearly can't, Nathaniel said. She laughed again. Wet-eyed and real and exhausted, and something underneath exhaustion that was lighter than anything she'd let him see before. She folded the letter with care. She put it in her pocket next to her mother's ring. He knew, she said. He knew all of it. He knew what he was doing when he made you promise. He knew you'd come eventually. He knew I'd be furious, and then I'd listen, and then... She shook her head. He engineered this entire situation from a battlefield in Louisiana. He was always extremely managing, Nathaniel said. He absolutely was. She looked at him. Nathaniel. Yes. I would like to not be an arrangement anymore. You haven't been an arrangement for quite some time, he said. I just didn't know how to say that without presuming. Then stop presuming and just say things, she said. That's what I've been trying to get you to do since Baltimore. I know. He looked at their hands still together on the table. I love you. Is that direct enough? She stared at him. That was, she said, considerably more direct than anything you've said in 2 months. Samuel said, don't carry me. I'm trying not to carry anything I don't have to. He met her eyes. I love you, not as Samuel's sister, not as the woman I owe a debt to, as the person who made coffee at 4 a.m. without being asked and told me I sounded like a person and fixed my crop rotation and walked into Colonel Hargrove's study and defended me when she had every reason not to. He paused. That person, specifically. Clara was quiet for a moment. I love you too, she said, as straightforwardly as she did everything. As if she had made the decision examined, it found it accurate, and saw no reason to dress it in anything other than plain language. I have been trying very hard not to, and I was not successful. How long? He said. The laugh, she said. When you laughed in this kitchen 3 weeks ago, that was when I stopped being able to be sensible about it. He thought about that morning. The way she'd told him to sound like a person more often. The way she'd looked back at her coffee like she was hiding something. You hid it well, he said. I hide everything well, she said. It's a survival skill. I'm working on it. Don't work too hard, he said. I like knowing what you're thinking. You will not always like it. I know that. I have opinions about the North Field that you are going to find deeply inconvenient. I'm sure. And I intend to write to Mrs. Harrison about establishing a proper lending library in this county, and I will require your name on the correspondence. Done. She looked at him. Then she looked down at their joined hands. She turned his hand over the way she'd done earlier, and she looked at the scar on his knuckle, the calluses that were not what you'd expect from a plantation owner, but were exactly what you'd expect from a man who worked alongside his people rather than watching them. She had noticed that early. She had filed it next to 47 letters in the account she kept of what kind of man he was. Samuel was right, she said. About what specifically? About you. She looked up. He was right about you. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, he was right about you too, for the record. He said you would make me better, and I told him that was a significant overestimate of what any person could do for another person, and I was wrong about that. Don't tell Eleanor you were wrong about something, Clara said. She'll consider it permission. Eleanor, he said, and there was something in the way he said it, weary and fond in equal measure, which surprised him when he heard it in his own voice. What exactly is your understanding with Eleanor? She runs the house, Clara said. She's very good at it, and I have no interest in doing it myself. I run the fields. She doesn't interfere with the fields. I don't interfere with the household. She paused. And she is going to help me write the letters about the library because she knows everyone in 3 counties, and that is far more useful than anything I could bring to it. He stared at her. You've recruited Eleanor. I've found a use for her considerable abilities that doesn't involve managing me, Clara said. It's better for everyone. He thought about Eleanor this morning, knocking on a door with a letter she'd held for 2 years, and 2 words that had cost her more than she'd ever admit. He thought about the woman who had run this estate through a war and a grief and a brother-in-law who came home broken, who had done everything wrong in the service of something she genuinely believed was right. He thought that Clara saw people the way Samuel had seen people all the way through the parts worth keeping alongside the parts worth challenging. He thought Samuel sent exactly the right person. He thought, I am going to spend the rest of my life being grateful for that, and probably not saying it often enough, and she is going to tell me to say it plainly, and I am going to try. Clara, he said. She looked at him. Thank you, he said, for coming, for staying, for... He stopped. For all of it. She looked at him for a moment with that expression open, steady, decided. Then she reached into her pocket and took out her mother's ring. She set it on the table between them. "Put it on my hand," she said. "When you're ready. No more arrangements. No more Baltimore. Just when you're ready." He picked up the ring. He looked at her. "I've been ready," he said, "since a pawn shop in Baltimore." She held out her hand. She wore the ring to breakfast the next morning. She did not announce it. She did not make a point of it. She came downstairs the same way she always did, slightly before 7, practical and unhurried. And she poured her coffee and sat down and picked up the document she'd been reading the night before about the Northfield drainage. Eleanor came in 10 minutes later. She looked at Clara's hand. She looked at Nathaniel. She sat down, poured her own coffee, and said, "I'll write to Richmond this week about the social calendar for autumn. The Whitmore name needs to be visible and correct before the end of summer." That was all. No ceremony. No acknowledgement beyond that one look. But it was Eleanor, and from Eleanor, that look and that immediate practical deployment of her considerable social resources was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Nathaniel caught Clara's eye over his cup. She looked back at him with an expression that said she had told him so, which she had, twice. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said. Eleanor turned a page of her correspondence. "Don't thank me. The county already knows something shifted after Hargrove's meeting. I'm simply ensuring the narrative we prefer is the one that takes hold." She paused. "And I've taken the liberty of mentioning to Reverend Moore's wife that Miss Bennet has some views on establishing a lending library in the county." Mrs. Moore expressed significant interest. "I expect she'll call Thursday." Clara set down her coffee. "You did that without asking me." "Yes," Eleanor said. "Eleanor, you want a library. Mrs. Moore has connections to 3 families with substantial book collections who have no heirs interested in them. It was an obvious pairing." Eleanor finally looked at her directly. "If you'd prefer I leave your projects alone, say so, and I will. But you said I was useful, and I intend to be." Clara looked at her for a moment. Then, "Thursday works." Eleanor went back to her correspondence. Nathaniel watched the two of them, the way you watch something that is both new and somehow inevitable, like a crop coming up in soil, you'd amend it on faith. The first public appearance as a real couple, not arrangement, not managed fiction, but the actual thing happened at the Hargrove supper 10 days later. They arrived together. That alone was different. The 12 people in that dining room understood it the way county people understand everything immediately and completely, and without anyone having to say a word about it. Margaret Alcott, who had delivered the tea-table verdict on Clara's origins 3 months prior, looked at the ring on Clara's hand, and then at Nathaniel's face, and made a rapid private recalculation that Clara could track from across the room. Margaret Alcott was not kind, but she was pragmatic, and Nathaniel Whitmore's reputation had been publicly and convincingly rehabilitated by his dead friend's sister, which meant that whatever Clara Bennet was, she was not someone to be managed with careful questions about family origins. "Miss Bennet," Margaret said, approaching before dinner. Then, with the particular emphasis that meant the correction was intentional, "Forgive me, Mrs. Whitmore." "Miss Bennet is fine," Clara said. "I've been Miss Bennet for 23 years. I'm in no hurry to replace it." Margaret blinked. "Though Mrs. Whitmore is also accurate," Clara added pleasantly. "I'm comfortable with either." Nathaniel, standing beside her, said nothing. But she felt him shift slightly, that barely visible easing she'd come to read as his version of visible satisfaction. Hargrove found them after dinner. He was a man who said things directly which Clara had respected from their first meeting. He looked at Nathaniel and said, "I owe you an apology." "You were given false information," Nathaniel said. "I should have come to you first before letting it take hold." Hargrove's jaw was tight. He didn't apologize easily. This one was real. "Samuel Bennet was a good man. His record and yours both deserve better than what I almost did to them." He looked at Clara. "You have a steady head, Mrs. Whitmore." "Miss Bennet," Clara said. Hargrove almost smiled. "Miss Bennet, Nathaniel, you chose well." "Samuel chose well," Nathaniel said. "I just had the sense to listen." It was 3 days after the Hargrove supper that the soldier arrived. He came on horseback unannounced, a man named Daniel Reese, who had served under Nathaniel in the Gulf campaign, and who had ridden up from Charleston because he had heard through the particular intelligence network of veterans who kept track of their officers that Nathaniel Whitmore's name had been attached to a scandal regarding New Orleans, and that the scandal had been resolved, and that Nathaniel was apparently married, which Daniel Reese had considered sufficiently remarkable to investigate in person. He was a compact, direct man with a scar along his jaw that had not been there before 1814, and the kind of eyes that had seen enough to stop performing anything they didn't feel. He sat at the Whitmore kitchen table, the same table that had hosted so many important conversations that Clara had begun to consider it a participant in its own right, and he looked at Nathaniel across it and said, "You look better than I expected." "You expected worse," Nathaniel said. "I expected considerably worse," Daniel said. He looked at Clara, who was at the other end of the table with coffee and no intention of leaving. "You're Samuel's sister." "Yes," she said. "He talked about you constantly," Daniel said. "I mean that without exaggeration. From the moment he joined the unit until—" He stopped. "He was proud of you. Every letter you sent, he'd read parts of it to whoever would listen. Said you had the sharpest mind he'd encountered outside a university, and twice the sense of anyone inside one." Clara's hand around her cup was very still. "He talked about you too," Daniel said, turning back to Nathaniel. "Differently. He talked about you the way soldiers talk about the officers they'd follow anywhere, which is to say, not often, and only when they mean it." He paused. "I was there, at New Orleans. I want you to know that. I was in the field, and I know what the order was, and I know what the intelligence was, and I know that any of us would have made the same call with the same information." "Daniel, I'm not saying it to make you feel better," Daniel said, blunt as fieldwork. "I'm saying it because it's true, and because apparently someone tried to use it against you, and I want it on record that the men who were there don't see it the way that record tried to make it look." He held Nathaniel's gaze. "We went back after. The ones who came home. We talked about it. Not one of us blamed you, not then, not now." The kitchen held that for a moment. "I blamed myself," Nathaniel said. "I know. Samuel knew too." Daniel reached into his coat and took out a folded paper, old travel-worn, handled many times. "He gave me this the night before the assault. Said if he didn't come back I should hold it until Nathaniel was ready to read it. Said I'd know when that was." He set it on the table. "I've been holding it for 2 years. When I heard you'd gotten married, I thought that sounds like ready." Nathaniel looked at the paper. He did not reach for it immediately. Clara watched him look at it the way you look at something you need and are afraid of in equal measure. Then he picked it up. He read it. Clara watched his face. She had learned to read him not perfectly, not yet, but well enough to track the movements underneath the composure. She watched him go through several things. Sorrow. Something older than sorrow. Something that was cracking finally at a seam that had been held shut for too long. When he finished, he set it down on the table and pressed the heels of his hands over his eyes and stayed like that for a long moment. Daniel looked at Clara. Clara shook her head slightly. "Let him." After a while, Nathaniel lowered his hands. His face was open in the way it had been the morning after the letter's broken, in the way that means something is finally getting through, rather than something being destroyed. "He says he knew," Nathaniel said. His voice was rough. "The night before. He says he had a feeling, and he chose not to say anything, because if he said it out loud, it would frighten the younger men." He paused. "He says, 'Don't carry me.' I went back because it was right, and I knew it was right. The only thing I ask is that you live well enough for both of us. That means actually living, Nathaniel, not surviving. Living. There's a difference, and you know it." Clara reached across the table and put her hand over his. Daniel looked at their joined hands. He nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods when something has resolved the way it should. "He knew you'd end up moping," Daniel said. He used that word specifically. Moping. Nathaniel made a sound that was more than almost laughter this time. "He would. Said you were the most capable man he'd ever served with, and also the most likely to make a misery of yourself given the opportunity. Daniel picked up his coffee. He wasn't wrong about much. He was wrong about almost nothing, Nathaniel said. He was wrong about the weather the morning of the 14th, Daniel said. I remember it specifically because he was very confident and very incorrect. He was always confident about weather, Clara said. He had no basis for it whatsoever. My father tried to explain meteorology to him twice. He found it unconvincing. Daniel looked at her. Something in his face shifted into warmth. That sounds exactly right. They talked for 2 hours. Not about the war, not only about the war. About Samuel, which was different. The Samuel who argued about everything and was usually right. The Samuel who gave away food and clothing and never seemed to notice the giving. The Samuel who had made every room he was in feel like somewhere worth being. Clara contributed things Nathaniel didn't know. Nathaniel contributed things she didn't. Daniel offered both of them things neither had. By the end of it, they had between the three of them assembled someone more complete than any one of them had been holding on their own. Daniel left the next morning. He shook Nathaniel's hand. He looked at Clara and said, "He'd be pleased, in case you were wondering." "I was wondering," she said. "He'd be unbearably smug about it," Daniel added. "Completely insufferable. Told you so for weeks." "Months," Nathaniel said. "Months." Daniel agreed. He mounted up. "Take care of each other." He rode south and was gone. Nathaniel and Clara stood in the yard after the sound of hoofbeats faded. The summer morning was going on the way summer mornings did. Insects heat the distant sound of the field crew starting their day. Thomas's voice somewhere near the barn, ordinary and continuous. "He'd be smug," Clara said. "Absolutely insufferable." Nathaniel agreed. "Good," she said. "He deserves to be right about something." She went inside. He followed. The letter to Richmond about the lending library went out that week, signed by Clara, co-signed by Eleanor, with a postscript from Nathaniel, authorizing the funding. Mrs. Moore had come on Thursday, as Eleanor predicted, and had left 2 hours later, having committed 3 families' book collections to the cause, and also somehow having agreed to serve on an organizing committee that Clara had not technically established yet, but that now apparently existed. "How did you do that?" Nathaniel said after Mrs. Moore's carriage had gone. "I asked her what she thought should happen," Clara said. "People who are asked what they think should happen generally want to make sure it does." "That's—" He paused. "That's extremely effective." "I know." She was already writing. "Eleanor, I need the list of families in the eastern part of the county who have children between 7 and 14, who aren't in any formal education." Eleanor, without looking up from her own work, "I'll have it by Friday." He stood in the doorway of the study and watched the two of them work, Clara with her papers and her plans. Eleanor with her networks and her knowledge of everyone in 3 counties, and thought about what he'd been afraid this house would become after his brother died. A monument. A management exercise. A place where people performed their roles and called it living. He thought Samuel knew. Samuel knew that what this house needed was not preservation, but interruption. Not management, but someone who asked what should happen and then made it happen. He thought, "I owe that man everything." He thought, "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it." The school opened in October. Not a grand institution. A room in the old chapel building at the edge of the Whitmore property, repaired and furnished through a combination of Clara's organizing, Eleanor's connections, Mrs. Harrison's husband's lumber, and Nathaniel's money, which he had provided without condition or commentary, exactly as Clara had required. 12 children the first week, 17 the second. By the end of the month there was a waiting list, and Clara was writing to Philadelphia about curriculum materials. She taught 3 mornings a week herself. Nathaniel came once uninvited and stood in the back of the room and watched her explain long division to a 9-year-old with the same relentless patient precision she applied to agricultural ledgers, and he understood completely why Samuel had said, "Sharpest mind I've encountered," because there was something about watching Clara Bennett explain a thing she cared about that made it impossible to look anywhere else. She found him still there when the children left. "How long have you been standing there?" she said. "Long enough," he said. She looked at him. "Well, Samuel," he said, "was the most correct he has ever been. And he was correct about a very great many things." She crossed her arms. "You're going to have to be more specific. He said you'd make me better." He met her eyes. He was right. Significantly. "I want you to know I acknowledge that even though acknowledging it proves him right, and he would be completely unbearable about it." "He would," she agreed. And I love you," he said, straightforwardly and without management. "I love you the way people love things that have made them into something worth being. I love you in a way that I think has been true since before I knew what to call it. And I intend to keep saying it plainly because you told me once to stop preventing things, and I am trying very hard to follow that instruction." She was quiet for a moment. "You've gotten better at that," she said. "Saying things plainly, not preventing things." She walked toward him. "You used to brace whenever I came into a room, like something was about to be required of you that you weren't certain you could provide. And now—" She stopped in front of him. She looked up at him with those dark, steady eyes that had looked at him in a pawn shop like he was a ghost and a problem, and had slowly over months arrived at something entirely different. "Now," she said, "you look like a man who's home." He reached for her hand. Her mother's ring was warm from the morning. He turned it once on her finger the way he'd found himself doing, not checking just a habit, the same way you reach for something you need to confirm is still there. "Clara," he said. "Yes?" Is this—" He stopped, tried again. "Are you happy?" She considered it the way she considered everything genuinely without performance. "I'm not cold," she said. "I'm not hungry. I have books and a school and a crop rotation that's going to improve your yield by 30% next season." She paused. "And I have you, who are against all reasonable expectation and some considerable initial evidence to the contrary, exactly what Samuel said you were." She looked at him. "Yes, Nathaniel. I'm happy." "Good," he said. "I intend to keep it that way." "You're going to need to get better at delegating the field reports," she said. "You spend too much time on detail work that Thomas can handle." "I thought we were having a moment." "We are. I can have a moment and an observation simultaneously. I've been doing both at once for months." He laughed. Real and easy the way it came now, without surprise, without the wondering where it came from quality of those first weeks. It just came the way things come when you've stopped bracing against them. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She looked at them. She looked at their joined hands. She looked at the room, the small chalk marks on the board Clara hadn't erased, the child-sized chairs, the stack of borrowed books in the corner. "There are 14 families in the eastern county with children not in education," Eleanor said. "I've also identified a woman in Richmond, a retired schoolteacher, who may be willing to come south if the terms are right. I've drafted a letter." She held it out to Clara. "Read it before I send it. You'll want to adjust the language." Clara took it. "Thank you, Eleanor." "The library committee meets Friday," Eleanor added. "Mrs. Moore wants to expand the original scope. I told her that was your decision." She paused. She didn't like that. "She'll adapt," Clara said. "She will," Eleanor agreed. "She's already adapting. Most people do, given a clear enough example." She looked at Nathaniel. "Hargrove sent word this morning. There's a political appointment being discussed in Richmond. He's recommending your name." Nathaniel said nothing for a moment. Clara watched him. "Write back and tell him I'm honored," Nathaniel said, "and that I'm needed here." Eleanor looked at him, then at Clara. Something moved through her face, not surprise exactly, but something settling. Something that had been held at a certain tension and had finally quietly released. "I'll tell him." She left. Clara looked at Nathaniel. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Richmond would have been—" "I know what Richmond would have been," he said. "I know what it would have meant. Politically, for the name, for the county." He looked at her. I also know that I spent 2 years in a house full of guilt trying to make my survival mean something, and this—" He gestured not at the walls or the room, but at everything: the school, the library, the morning, the ring, the life that was being built in this particular place with these particular people. "This means something. I'm not leaving it." She looked at him for a long time. "Samuel picked well," she said finally. "He always did." She turned back to Eleanor's letter. She read it through. She picked up a pen, made 2 adjustments, handed it back toward the empty doorway, out of habit remembered Eleanor was gone, and set it on the desk to return later. "The school needs a name," she said. "What would you call it?" she thought. "The Bennett School," she said. "If that's all right with you." "It's your school. It's on your land." "It's your school," he said again. She looked at him. Then at the chalk on the board, the small chairs, the borrowed books. 12 children who had come because someone asked what should happen and then made it happen. More coming. A waiting list. A teacher in Richmond who might come south. A library in the planning stages. A county that had looked at a woman from nowhere and found to its own surprise that it needed what she was building. She thought about a pawn shop in Baltimore. A ring on a counter. A man who had said her name like he was trying it out and found it fit better than he'd expected. 2 years of forged letters. A boarding house. Cold mornings and lamp oil and letters she'd sent to an address that never answered, and all the while without her knowing something had been moving toward her. She thought about Samuel, who had known all of it from the beginning, and had arranged it with the same confident incorrectness he'd applied to weather forecasting and had been absolutely completely right. She picked up her mother's ring and looked at it on her hand. Then she looked up at Nathaniel. "The Bennett School," she said. "And you're coming Tuesday to explain the land grant system to the older children because I need them to understand property law before they're old enough for anyone to take advantage of them. And you explain it better than I do, because you're angrier about injustice than you admit, and that makes you a better teacher on the subject." "I'll be there," he said. She nodded once, picked up the curriculum notes, got back to work. Nathaniel stood in this room that smelled like chalk and summer, and the particular future that Clara Bennett had decided to build in the place where she had chosen to stay. And he thought that this was what Samuel had meant. Not grand, not dramatic, not a love story that arrived with fanfare and declaration. A woman at a desk planning a school wearing her mother's ring. A man standing in the doorway knowing he was home. 2 people who had survived the worst things loss could do to a person, and had found in each other not a rescue and not a remedy, but something rarer and truer and harder won than either a place where survival had finally irrevocably become a life. That was what Samuel Bennett had known from a battlefield in Louisiana when he wrote his last letter and trusted that the 2 people who loved him most would find their way to what they were supposed to be. He had been right about everything, and they had earned every word of it.